Krishna consciousness in the making of this. And the show is about a particularly dark chapter in the history of the movement.
So here, Joe Rogan is interviewing the guy who made the video, the 6-hour documentary on Peacock on New Vrindavan and the madness from Kirtanananda and everything. And I just want you to see what Joe Rogan has to say about what is the ideal, what he thinks is the ideal type of Krishna consciousness, or what Krishna consciousness actually means. And you'll see that even in 2024, Joe Rogan, and what to speak of everybody in America, basically in the Western world, has the same false assumption or wrong idea of what applied Krishna consciousness is. And my claim is that the fault is not really on, some Kirtanananda. Of course, he did horrors and stuff, but it's on every single Western householder in the West who still, by their body language, refuses to embrace their own language and their own external culture, and instead continue to artificially renounce their own God-given culture to embrace the external culture of North India or Bangladesh or Bengal, and telling the whole Western world that, this is the preferred way of practicing Krishna consciousness. Check this out.
In the 70s and 80s, that I don't think is representative of the movement like today. Like, I think it's a force for good in the world today, actually.
Yeah, I think the principles behind it, if you pay attention to the main guru, what was the older gentleman?
Prabhupada, yeah.
Yeah, my friend Duncan loves that guy.
Here, and a little bit later in that interview, Joe Rogan actually glorifies Prabhupada. So, that's great for Joe Rogan, because he's just done wonderful service, right, for the mission by glorifying Prabhupada. So he's definitely getting tons of bhakti points. But listen to his conception of what Krishna consciousness ideally means. And it's the same rhetoric, it's the same fear that has been present since the late 1970s. And it's a disaster. It's a disaster for the spreading of Krishna consciousness. So listen to this.
Yeah.
And what the whole concept behind it sounds beautiful. It's all just love and, relinquishing your possessions. And
there we go. Relinquishing your possessions. Let's hear that again.
Relinquishing your possessions and the hold that they have on you.
Yeah, the hold that they have on you, and especially this idea of relinquishing your possessions. Now, what can you expect? There's a saying in France: if you eat a goat, don't expect if your excrement, let's just say it bluntly, if you eat a lamb, don't complain if you pass wool. So similarly, if the body language of the householders, I'm not talking about the sannyasis here and the brahmacharis, because sannyasis and brahmacharis by definition are world denying, right? That's why they put on saffron. That's why they live in ashrams and monasteries. Yes, they go out and preach, so-called, and go out from their ashrams. The whole idea of, out and in refers to monks, basically, who live in, a monastery and who go out to, spread the good news. So even though they preach and they spread Krishna consciousness and sometimes, really destroy public opinion, but sometimes also do good things like passing out books, the holy name, and so on, they are by definition world denying, right? Prabhupada defines sannyasis in the first canto of the Bhagavatam as socially dead. However, times a million, the householders are not world denying. They do not relinquish. If they relinquish anything, it's the internal motivation to exploit others and to exploit the material energy and to be the enjoyer, and they relinquish sinful life, like all Vaishnavas are supposed to relinquish sinful life. But in terms of external things, in terms of external matter, clothes, language, architecture, etc., they don't relinquish it. And yet, you've got Joe Rogan here, right, who believes that, Hare Krishna, right, which means Hare Krishna for 99% of people in general, which are, people who are living in the world, who will never, ever be monks, even for them, it means relinquishing the material world. So when you're, continue dressing yourself with, robes from West Bengal from the 16th century, and Middle Eastern kurtas from, the graceful importation from the Middle Eastern, influence, right? That 3-button kurta, as if that's like so spiritual, right? And you continue to shave your head, right? Even though you're supposed to work and maintain your wife, maintain your kids, and have a job, and have a dignified, a prominent career as a doctor or as a lawyer or as a politician in the world, and you continue to think, right, and to teach your children that having a bald head with a little ponytail in the back, with a little rat tail in the back, which, let's be clear, has nothing to do with exclusive Vaishnavism, unlike Tulsi and Tilak. Tilak and Tulsi are mentioned by Rupa Goswami, and in India, nobody except the Vaishnavas have Tilak and Tulsi beads. However, millions upon millions of non-Vaishnavas who eat meat, who are polytheists, you name it, wear dhotis and Muslim kurtas, and have a little shika if they happen to be from the Brahmin caste, or if, their grandmother happened to die a week ago and so they shave their head and they keep a little ponytail, right? That has nothing to do with Vaishnavism. And yet, in this context, our Western householders are still convinced that if they deck themselves out, with their little shaved head and ponytail, thus probably losing out on tons of opportunities to actually make good money in the world and be prominent members of society, so they can be good role models for their own very children, 90% of whom have left ISKCON and continue leaving ISKCON when they reach the age of 18 because they don't want to be, associated with freaky parents who look like Martians, right? They continue to shave their heads and have their little ponytail and continue wear their Indian robes when they're supposed to be world embracing. And so therefore, back in the early 80s when the movie Hannah and Her Sister came out, and Woody Allen, was interested in the theology and asks this devotee, in Central Park, like, hey, can you please tell me about your philosophy? Do you guys believe in reincarnation, or does that mean if I become if I'm a bad person, I become a aardvark in my next life? I mean, check this out here. Here's the scene for you. Let's see if you're able to see it. Yeah, here we go.
Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. What makes you interested in becoming a Hare Krishna?
Well, I'm not saying that I want to join or anything, but I know you guys believe in reincarnation.
So very interesting here. He says, I'm not saying, the first thing he says, I'm not saying I want to join. Because again, back in the 70s, there was this preaching that in order to become a devotee of Krishna, you relinquish, right? The exact words of Joe Rogan, you relinquish the material world and you join a commune, you join a temple full time. So right away, he's like, I don't want to join or anything, but I have a philosophical question. And here's where it gets interesting. He asks a philosophical question. Does that mean that, according to your scriptures, according to your theology, tell me about it? Check this out.
So it interests me.
Yeah, well, what's your religion?
Well, I was born Jewish, but last winter I tried to become a Catholic, and it didn't work for me. I studied and I tried and I gave it everything, but Catholicism for me was die now, pay later, and I just couldn't get with it.
Catholicism is die now, pay later.
And I wanted to.
You're afraid of dying?
Well, yeah, naturally, aren't you? Let me ask you, in reincarnation, does that mean my soul would pass to another human being?
So you see, again, he's asking about theological questions. Like the Bhagavad Gita is super attractive to people. The notion of past lives, future lives, even the idea of God being a teenager that has a romantic, love affair with this other teenage beautiful goddess, and the whole cosmos, everything emanates from that beautiful love affair between Radha and Krishna. That's super appealing, right? So he's attracted on theological grounds.
Would I come back as a moose or an aardvark or something?
Take our literature,
Uh-huh.
read it over, and think about it.
Thank God the devotee gives Woody Allen the books, right? Because there's still devotees today who think, oh no, we got to sell Prabhupada's books only. We can't give them away. We can't give Prabhupada's books away. Oh, no, because they don't get the Agyata Sukriti. And, Prabhupada said, such nonsense. Does that mean we should make every Bhagavatam class, accessible only if people pay money? Right? What's the difference between giving a class on Prabhupada's books and giving Prabhupada's books to people? Right? So this idea held by some still in ISKCON that no, it's much better that we sell Prabhupada's books. We can't give them away. It's such nonsense. But anyway, that's a small parenthesis. Let's keep hearing what Woody Allen has to say here.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Hare Krishna.
Now look. Woody Allen is going to speak to himself, and pay very close attention. Here's a spoiler alert. He says, I know the things by heart. This what he says by heart. He says, who are you kidding? You're going to become a Krishna, right? And then he says, you're going to shave your head, put on robes, and dance in airports you would look like Jerry Lewis. God, I'm so depressed. And I don't know if you know who Jerry Lewis is, but Jerry Lewis was a very clownish comedian from the 1960s or something, who was like known for looking really stupid. You see? That's Jerry Lewis for you, right? So Woody Allen is saying, God, you're going to become, who are you kidding? You're going to become a devotee of Krishna. You're going to, just check it out. Listen from himself.
Who are you kidding? You're gonna be a Krishna? You're gonna shave your head and put on robes and dance around at airports?
You see? You're going to dance in airports. That's, what Hare Krishnas used to do. But you're going to shave your head and put on robes, right? You're going to shave. He does not want to shave his head and put on robes. And my dear Prabhus, if you're a householder and you're white or you're black, or even if you're Indian and living in the West or whatever, if you're on this planet Earth in the modern age, but let's just stick to the West especially, right? If you're a Western devotee, householder, right, maintaining a wife, maintaining a family, and you have your little bald head, maybe your large bald head and your little ponytail in the back, and you're decked out even at the temple, what to speak of outside when you're doing Harinam, and you're decked out in your white robes and your white Muslim kurta, you really have to ask yourself, what's the body language? What am I telling Woody Allen? What am I telling Joe Rogan here, right? What's the body language? What is the body language? Don't cry, if wool comes out. Don't cry if the Hare Krishna movement is totally subsumed now by the Indian diaspora, right? The Indian diaspora. Nothing against Indians, nothing against souls in Indian bodies. Obviously, everyone's welcome to Lord Chaitanya's movement. Those souls, regardless of what body they're in, are glorious who take shelter of Lord Chaitanya. However, when Prabhupada, for example, saw a picture of the devotee standing in front of the door of the new ISKCON Geneva temple, he said, oh, this is very nice, but how many of these are local? Right? So when you go to America or New Zealand or Australia or England or even Italy now or even France, Switzerland, you name it, any country where there's a pretty large Indian diaspora, and when I say pretty large, it's still really small compared to the whole country. Like in America, the Indian diaspora, which includes, the Muslims and all the non-Vaishnava Hindus, is only about 1.5% of the whole population, right? So when you see that our temples from New York, right, to Detroit, to New Orleans, to Chicago, to Houston, to Dallas, to San Diego, to Los Angeles, to San Jose, to Manchester, to London, etc., are made up from the temple president all the way down to the last congregation members of 95%, glorious Indian devotees. And you're a Westerner, and you continue to deck yourself out with your little ponytail and your shaved head, which has nothing to do, the ponytail, little shika, has nothing to do with Vaishnavism, unlike Tulsi and Tilak, which, if you want to die on the hill with that, I have no objection, because it's an exclusively Vaishnava symbol. Rupa Goswami mentions it. Even Lord Chaitanya talks about Tilak. Okay, even then, time, place, and circumstance has to be acknowledged. But Tulsi and Tilak are really the Vaishnava, symbols par excellence. But dhotis, saris, a shaved head with a little ponytail, is something that is common among millions and millions of people in India who have nothing to do with Vaishnavism. And yet you think that putting that stuff on in public or among other devotees or new devotees who come to the temple is totally legit, and you don't think, okay, what's the body language? And then you don't see the connection with people like Woody Allen saying, you know what, I'm not really interested in joining, and sounds great philosophy. I love the idea of reincarnation and all that, but I'm not going to adopt their philosophy and practice, because I'd look like Jerry Lewis, right? I'd end up like Jerry Lewis with a bald head, right? And then Joe Rogan saying the same thing, like, okay, it sounds good ideally when they're not nuts and, molesting children and everything. It sounds good. It's you relinquish your material goods, your material life. But it's not about relinquishing. If you're a householder, you're not supposed to relinquish. On the contrary, you're supposed to be in the world and using the material energy, starting with your own culture, with your own external culture, starting with the very clothes that you put on your body to serve Krishna. So we shouldn't cry if ISKCON is completely within the Indian diaspora now, because our body language, and when I say our, I'm talking about the householders, especially the male householders, is just disastrous when it comes to actually appealing to a non-Indian Western audience, and the result speaks for themselves.